The Mesa Chamber of Commerce Inside Business Podcast brings you a unique view of Mesa through its vibrant business community and the subjects that are important. The podcast is produced in the Mesa Chamber of Commerce Media Studio, sponsored by the University of Phoenix. Our podcast is hosted by Mesa Chamber of Commerce CEO Sally Harrison. Please enjoy this episode of the Mesa Chamber Inside Business Podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Mesa Chamber Inside Business Podcast. My name is Bob Nelson, and I am the Director of Communications here at the Mesa Chamber of Commerce. Today, we have a very special guest here with us in the podcast. We are welcoming Mr. Gordon Graham. Mr. Gordon Graham is a 33-year veteran, now retired, of California law enforcement. In this capacity, he served as a street cop, supervisor, manager, and executive. Mr. Graham was awarded a BA in business from the San Francisco State College, a teaching credential from California State University, Long Beach, and a master's degree in safety and systems management from the University of Southern California. He is also a Juris Doctorate from the Western State University. He has taken his background as a cop, risk manager, and attorney, and is one of the co-founders of Lexapool, a company designed to standardize public safety practices around America. He has presented to the public safety personnel all around the world over time, and I am happy to have him here on the podcast. Welcome, Gordon.
Well, Bob, thank you for the invitation. And first and foremost, I want to thank all the good people at the Chamber and the City of Mesa for making this all possible. You heard the introduction. 52 years ago, the California Highway Patrol took a chance and they hired me. And I went to the academy for 16 weeks. And in that academy, I learned what the California Highway Patrol was all about: preservation of life, preservation of life. And that was beat into my brain. Preservation of life is what we're all about. And the scheme back then was the three E's: education, engineering, and enforcement. And for those of you who are really into this stuff, over the decades, they've added on two more E's: electronics and EMS. So if we want to really preserve life, and that's the primary mission of everyone in public safety, from our dispatchers to our code enforcement people, to our cops, our firefighters, our building inspectors, and everybody in between, the primary mission is preservation of life. And that's the theme that I'm going to have on April 23rd at the Convention Center from 8 to 5. The theme is going to be creating and maintaining the high reliability organization, giving all of our people the necessary tools to go out there and preserve life.
So for those in code enforcement, imagine being able to proactively identify and prevent hazards before they become emergencies. Can you give our listeners a sneak peek at the cutting edge technologies you'll be teaching at the symposium to achieve this?
The engineering component, hopefully all the good people at NFPA and ICC have put together suggested policies and procedures for you to use in your job as a fire marshal, as a building inspector, as a code enforcement professional. With respect to the education, that'll be part of my mission, getting you the word, but your mission is to make sure our public, our customers are educated. And of course, the enforcement component. Rules without enforcement are just nice pieces of paper. So how are you going to accomplish this? I am going to accomplish this, hopefully, by using what I learned in graduate school some 52 years ago. And I'll explain this in greater detail when I get back there. But our military in World War II had a terrible, terrible, terrible safety record. And at the end of World War II, the military said, we got a problem. So in 1950, they contracted with the University of Southern California to build this Institute of Safety and Systems Management, a program to educate military leaders on the principles of risk. And 25 years later, 1975, they were running out of students. The Vietnam War was over. They were running out of students. So they opened the program for non-military personnel. And I was in the first class of non-military personnel at the ISSM, where I got hooked on the study of tragedy, again, with that goal of enhancing preservation of life. And they gave us 7 rules. Every professor I had talked about these 7 rules to create and maintain that high reliability organization. Mission ready, getting out there, doing the job, and preserving life. And very quickly, for our podcast purposes, I'll tell you the 7 rules. Rule 1, continuous improvement. Continuous improvement. We got to get better and better and better at what we do. Anything you can quantify, anything you can measure, anything you can establish a metric for, we've got to be constantly looking for the next best way. Not change for change's sake, but because change is absolutely necessary. And I'll be giving you some proven strategies and tactics, how you can keep up with this continuous improvement model. We got to get better and better and better at what we do. Rule 2, people running complex systems have got to be highly capable. And let me assure you, what you do in code enforcement and building inspections and as a fire marshal, those are complex systems. People running complex systems have got to be highly capable. I'll be very, very blunt here. If you hire stupid people, they'll always be stupid. They're not going to get better over time. And I'll give you some strategies and tactics on recruitment and retention, how to take care of those issues. Rule 3, the key role of the supervisor. The key role of the supervisor, blanket statement, and I'll drill down on this very deeply on April 23rd. You show me a tragedy in any aspect of public safety, I will show you approximate cause of whatever. But the real problem lying in wait all too often is a supervisor not behaving like a supervisor, or on the alternative, a supervisor who tried to behave like a supervisor and got no support from management. If either of those is present in any organization, that is a huge problem lying in wait and it needs to be addressed. And yes, I will be drilling down on how to select, mentor, develop, and train the newest generation of supervisors whose primary mission is enforcement of organizational policy. Rule 1, continuous improvement. Rule 2, quality people. Rule 3, the key role of the supervisor. Rule 4, you've got to have a healthy respect for the dangers and risks you face. Some of the stuff that we think is, oh, so risky is not. And some of the stuff that's not even on your radar yet is the stuff that's going to come back to haunt you. And I will be drilling down deep on black swans and gray rhinos. And for those of you who want to do something in advance of the class, 2 great books on my recommended reading list. And by the way, if you want my reading list, lexipol.com/presentations, get my reading list. 2 great books, The Black Swan by Nassim Nicholas Taleb and The Gray Rhino by Michelle Walker. And by the way, Michelle and I team teach a class at University of Virginia, Practical Applications for Risk Management in Public Safety Operations. This woman is scary smart. The Black Swan. 1597, this Englishman goes down to Australia. He sees this big black bird that looks like a swan. But in his world, where he comes from, swans are white. So he asked the Aussie guy, what kind of bird is that? It's a black swan, mate. To the Englishman, that was an unknown, something he had never, ever considered the possibility of a black swan. On the other hand, Michelle Walker's great book, The Gray Rhino, these massive 4,000-pound beasts that are running right at us. We can see them coming, and we refuse to get out of the way. By the end of our time together on April 23rd, 5 p.m., I want to convince you there are 0 black swans in your world. Your tragedies, the injuries, the deaths, the embarrassments, the indictments, the lawsuits, the loss of public trust, none of these things are sneaking up on us. They're coming right at us. Whether you study West Warwick, Rhode Island, or Oakland, California, or anything in between, they're coming right at us. We can see them coming, and we refuse to get out of the way. Why that happens, how that happens, will be explained in great detail on April 23rd. Rule 1, continuous improvement. Rule 2, quality people. Rule 3, solid supervision. Rule 4, respecting risk. Rule 5, the training has got to be constant and rigorous. Constant and rigorous. And I will give you a system on April 23rd on how to make every day a training day. And not random training, but focused training. Training on the stuff that's got the highest probability of ending up in tragedy. I'll show you how to build that program. Rule 6, the audit function. In government, audits are what I call lip service audits. We got all sorts of pieces of paper saying that everything is wonderful, when in fact, there are significant problems lying in wait. And then the tragedy occurs, and the news media gets involved, the lawyers get involved, and they use the Public Records Act and pretrial discovery, and they peel back the layers of the onion. And what? None of these things we said we were doing were in fact being done. You've got to have a robust audit process in place, and I'll give you several strategies on how to improve your audit process. And finally, Rule 7, continuous learning. The organization and the members thereof have got to have the ability and willingness to learn from mistakes of the past. And not to beat a dead horse today, but I got to tell you, we keep on making the same mistakes over and over and over again, over and over and over again. And I'll give you some strategies on how to prevent that from happening in your organization. So anyhow, that is a big overview of what I'm going to cover. There'll be a lot of other things built in there. I want to give you some thoughts on a system I put together called the 5 concurrent themes for success. If you want to enhance all of these issues, recognize the value of risk management, making sure you have good systems in place, good policies and procedures, making sure the key role of the supervisor, and discipline when rules are not being followed. We'll be talking about the risk frequency matrix. We'll be drilling down on all of this. So Bob, in a nutshell, that's what I'm going to be covering. Do you have any questions or anything I need to drill down on a little bit more?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. Do I get a certificate at the end of this?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Everybody will get a certificate. You can put it on your wall. If you want, I'll put my picture on it. So you can say, wow, I went to a class by that guy.
I feel like I just went through the whole thing there in about like a minute and a half.
Oh, we're just scratching the surface. We're just scratching the surface. There is so much that we can do.
Cool. So you are on the road a lot, right?
Used to
Is
be.
what it sounds like. How often are you speaking each year?
Oh, very rarely now.
Really?
For 25 years, I left on Sunday and came home Friday night. 40,000 miles a month on airplanes. And then COVID hit, and that slowed down everything. And then people came up with this Zoom idea. So my 40,000 miles a month is now down to maybe 1 or 2 trips a month. I have an obligation to my company to do some appearances on their behalf, but I don't travel much anymore. But when I got the opportunity for this one, when they were saying how broad the program was in terms of bringing in all the players, the code enforcement people, the building inspectors, the fire marshals, the cops, everybody. And if I can get this group thinking about learning and sharing together and studying past tragedies, we can really make your community a whole bunch safer.
Well, we at the Chamber have always had a very deep and fruitful connection with our public safety departments. We love them. They're very integral to what we do. We do a lot with them. They're very progressive. They're very open to ideas, and they think outside the box all the time. So it is certainly not a surprise that they have invited you to come and speak at this event. So excited to see you in April. Will people get and I don't know this because I haven't seen the itinerary or anything, but will people get some one-on-one time if they need to? Do you know?
Well, that's usually pretty tough. It depends on how big the audience is. If only one person shows up, I guarantee you they will get a lot of one-on-one time. And by the way,
whole day, they get the whole day with you.
By the way, and maybe you can edit this or do whatever you want with it. But I got exposed to the fire service back in the late 70s. They had a program called Module 1, Module 2, and Module 3. And it was a relationship between firefighters and cops on hazardous material events, who was in charge and who was doing things. And so I met a whole bunch of firefighters. Well, a firefighter named Paul Stein, he's very popular in the fire world. He and I were tasked with teaching classes on hazardous materials, Mod 1, Mod 2, and Mod 3. And usually we had, several hundred people show up. Well, guess what? One day we showed up, there was only one person in the class. One person in the class. And this is like 8 hours of overtime for me to teach this class. So this person could not leave. So we had a lot of one-on-one time. We even took him to lunch, so he couldn't leave. But
can't leave. You got to go through this class.
We're getting 8 hours overtime each of us. So.
All right. Well, Gordon, thank you so much for joining me for this edition of the Inside Business Podcast. I have been your host, Bob Nelson with the Mesa Chamber of Commerce. Excited to see you come into Mesa. Excited to show you a good time. Excited to give you the opportunity to speak to a lot of professionals and help them understand risk management and ways to improve what they do. So looking forward to seeing you. Any last thoughts before we go?
Gordon Graham signing off.
Thank you, Mr. Graham.
This has been a Mesa Chamber of Commerce Inside Business Podcast. You can find all podcast episodes at iTunes, Spotify, or your own favorite podcast website. You can also find them online at mesachamber.org. Content of this podcast is copyright the Mesa Chamber of Commerce, unless otherwise noted.